Hey guys, it's Jason Desmond from the Jantan Collective. Remember, subscribe, like, and comment below. We talk about a lot of different things. So if you think that we should be talking about something and getting some experts in, do get in touch with us and we will talk about it. Now, times are tough. For some others, it's been tougher than others. During the quarantine period, just a couple of months back, the numbers that we got from an article that we saw from the Women's Aid Organization, 234 calls about domestic abuse and things like that. But their usual numbers, 60 over 63. That's a four-fold increase. Abuse. What's up with that? Today, we're speaking to Charlene Murray, who's from the Women's Aid Organization, and you're a services director. Are my numbers correct there?
Well, your numbers are correct, and I would say that over the last few months, we've seen a significant increase in the number of calls who have contacted WAO through our hotline and also through our TINA WhatsApp messaging, asking for information, talking about the distress situations that they have been stuck in, and also generally knowing what their options are in this period of RMCO.
When you say calls, and you said there was an increase, so my numbers are, because for me it's kind of shocking already, fourfold increase, right?
Yes.
When you say increase, how much of an increase and what do you mean by calls?
Okay, so Women's Aid Organization operates a hotline, and it is what we call an SGBV hotline, which is sexual gender-based violence. Basically, we encourage anyone who has issues on abuses that they have faced, or even if they need information on their rights, if they know individuals who are in a situation of abuse, or they themselves are individuals who, what we call survivors, survivors who could be in a situation of abuse, they would typically call us for assistance. And so when we talk about calls, we're talking about the number of calls that come through our hotline with a substantive need for these kind of information. So we're not talking about the calls that have been dropped. We're not talking about accidental wrong number calls.
Okay. That means they called in, hey, I need help.
Yes. They call in either to ask for help or to gather information so that they can help someone they know who's in a situation of distress. And going back to the function of the hotline, we typically work with anyone who has gender-based violence experiences. But the stark fact is that the majority of our calls, and this is a consistent statistic over the last 10 years, the majority of our calls are calls associated with domestic violence.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they just in Klang Valley though, or?
No, so our numbers are published everywhere. Wherever and whoever we can get to share our numbers, we would do that. But we do get the majority of callers from the area of Klang Valley as opposed to other states.
Right. But that does not mean that most, GBVs, right, gender-based violence, it doesn't mean that abuse only happens in urban settings in the Klang Valley.
Definitely
right?
not. Yeah, definitely not. I think abuse, when we talk about domestic violence in particular, and we talk about gender-based violence, abuse is widespread. It doesn't segregate the social status class that you might come from. It doesn't, so there's a common misconception that when we talk about domestic violence, it only happens with the lower strata. Of,
you think B40 or something.
Yes, you think of B40, you think of individuals who do not know of their rights better, but that is untrue. According to the statistics that we have and the calls that we have consistently received over the years, we would say that it's across the board. You have individuals from the middle income class, you have individuals from high profile societies who call our hotline nonetheless to gather information.
Right. So let's classify, I suppose that's a pretty okay word. Let's classify abuse. Physical, mental, emotional, or are they all one and the same?
Well, they're all different. And I think I would like to add two more elements to that.
Really?
So we talk about, these are the three most common things that you know about.
Yeah.
The physical aspect, because you can see it. The emotional aspect, because you can also see it that individuals feel depressed, they feel repressed. The mental state where which is probably the hardest kind of abuse to pinpoint, because it's not something which can be seen by the naked eye. It's not tangible. But there's also two different abuses, types of abuses that work hand in hand with all together. And one is typically financial abuse, getting survivors to be dependent on their perpetrators.
Right.
And the one that people don't usually see as abuse, but it's a very clear situational, it's a context where a lot of survivors find themselves in, which is social abuse. So the actual removal of someone from all forms of social support.
Right.
And you are right to point out that they all work together. You would hardly ever see someone who is physically abused but not emotionally and mentally abused. And you would hardly ever see someone who is mentally abused but potentially not financially or socially abused. So it's easy and probably true to say that a person could experience more than one form of abuse at any given time.
So it could be one or all.
Yes.
Of that, right?
Yep.
But why do men abuse? It's not like when you say rape, it's obviously sexual. It's not, it's control. Why do men abuse? It might not be the same thing, but why does it happen?
So I think your question is more of why do you think it is always the women who come across as being the survivors?
Yeah.
Or in the case, the victims or the common.
And also, I want whoever's watching, I want all the Jantans, all the Jantanites to watch this and learn, and also realize that men are abusing, and then we need to be able to do something about it. We want to be better at protecting women and empowering women as well. But we can't run away from the fact that men do abuse. Is it a power thing? Is it a power trip thing? What?
It is. So if you look at statistics worldwide, let's not just put it into a geographical situational context. Let's look at it worldwide. When we look at domestic violence in general, individuals in relationships, individuals in an intimate setting, we always see that the numbers of males abusing females are somewhat higher and more prevalent. And what years of research and multiple research has shown that the whole reason why abuse even happens in the first place is because there is an unequal power struggle that is going on in a relationship and within the context of, within a cultural context as well. So it doesn't matter which country you come from, what kind of cultural beliefs you hold, even though it does matter to some extent. But in general, I mean, you could come from Western civilization or you could be Asian.
Right. Okay.
The patriarchal processes that has been inculcated into the norms of what we believe to be normal is there. And therefore, it creates unequal power struggle where someone has to have the last say over another person. So it is true that the majority of cases, the perpetrators happen to be males. In situations of domestic violence, the husbands, the boyfriends, the fiancés are the ones who are the individuals who are typically perpetrators, or what we would label them as.
Yep.
But I would say that abuse in general is all about inequality of power.
So how does it start though? I mean, does a man, or maybe as a boy, he sees a girl that, hey, I want to get together with this girl, and I want to get together with her because she's weak, because she comes from a lower income family, and I know that I can lord over her, and then I can. Is that how it starts?
So you've actually answered the question, because what we're talking about is that respect and that equality. Now, if you walk out there and, okay, let's not put it as male and female, but if you are in a setting, you could be three males living in or working in the same space, but if you do not have that sense of we are equals, you will never treat someone the way you expect someone to treat you. And so when we talk about feminism movements, when we talk about, getting, smashing the glass ceiling, getting rid of patriarchal practices and all, we're really not talking about, hey, men, come and protect us women.
Right.
We're talking about treat us with respect.
Right.
Treat us with the same sense of equality that you would as treating a male counterpart. Respect the opinions. Know that this is a partnership and this is not a situational context where you are expected to protect the other person because the person is seen as the weaker sex.
Right.
So that is really the notion of why abuses even come about. That feeling of, it could start off with that feeling of, I am one up and it is my duty to protect you, and if you do not see things my way, then I have an opinion to tell you how to think or feel or do. And that is really the kind of practices that we want to move away from.
Right.
So one thing that Women's Aid Organization is truly passionate about is creating that equality. So we are a feminist organization, but we are constantly looking for men to join our cause, especially on platforms like this. We're out there to tell people that we're not looking at getting people to subscribe to the idea that women need to be one up. We're talking about give us the empowerment that we deserve, empower us instead of protect us.
Right.
So it has to be a change of mindset in order for abuse to de-escalate.
So the fact that if we think, women are weak, we need to protect them, that's already wrong to think of, right? We need to just think of they're human beings like us as well, right?
Yeah.
Now,
And just going back to that, common phrases and practices of calling someone my woman, and this is my boo, and it is
my boo? No.
It is, well, that's so 80s, right? But it is this kind of mindset, and also perhaps something that people have learned throughout the years. Women have learned that it is okay to be talked to that way. It is okay to be treated that way. Men who have seen or come from family settings or even environments where they have seen how a woman is treated and therefore carried on to believe that that is exactly the way they should be treating their partners, their sisters, their mothers, any other female counterparts. It is the decades and century-long of patriarchal practices that have been in place, whether it is jarring or not, which is the reason why we see that women are particularly targeted.
Now, earlier we talked about the stats where during the quarantine period, the numbers just kind of shot up fourfold. And you said the numbers might be even higher. How much higher are we talking about here?
So June recorded the highest number of calls that we had received, and June was really the beginning, or really towards the end of the MCO, the beginning of the RMCO actually, where people were starting to slowly get back to the new norm, to go off to work. But a lot of individuals were still working from home. So June was the highest amount of calls, and what we could deduce from that also was that individuals or perpetrators had gone to work and women were able to call us more freely.
Right.
Because yes, MCO brought out a lot of calls of distress to us, but we also acknowledge that there were many other individuals who were constantly monitored, and therefore they couldn't use their devices to contact us because they were constantly being monitored. And so June was the highest number, where we received a total of 493 calls.
Let's talk about the calls right now.
Yep.
How bad do the calls get? I mean, I'm sure there's a large spectrum,
That's a
wide
spectrum,
spectrum,
yeah.
right?
So you have individuals who call to test the waters and see what exactly they can do about the situation.
What does that mean? Like, could you help me? What?
More of knowing about their rights. Do you think this is abuse?
Right.
If he doesn't allow me to meet my parents ever since we've got married, I live in the same apartment as my boyfriend and he doesn't like any of my friends calling, or or me going out with my friends or keeping in touch with my friends, or it was just a slap. Do you think that's abuse? Or he scolds me every day, puts me down, forces me to have sex with him.
Right.
It could be things like this where we have callers that call us to fish for information, and I think those are very important calls that we take very seriously when people are calling us for information, because we believe that one wrong move and you are actually convincing a survivor of violence that there is no leeway for her to
Right.
get out of that situation.
So
Those are the mild spectrum
Right.
of the calls, but of equal importance. And of course, you get the other spectrum of calls where individuals are literally in a situation of distress.
how bad?
You hear screaming, shouting.
During the abuse.
During the abuse, you also have individuals who you can tell would call you with harsh voices because they're trying so hard not to be overheard, but seeking advice on how they could escape from the confinement of their home, from these distressing events that are happening to them. And the sad thing, or rather the troubling thing, is the majority of calls that we get are individuals who are mothers, and therefore the whole idea of living that situation of abuse is not really a decision that they can just take lightly, because they think about the future of their children. They think about whether, where am I going to go
You can't just run
How
away
am I
on your
going
own,
to
right?
be able to afford this?
Yeah.
And a lot of women, if you look at our statistics, if you go to our website, we have our yearly annual reports with a lot of statistics that you could just browse through. And the majority of women that call us are married women with children. And the majority of them as well, a good percentage of them, something close to 40%, are what we call homemakers. We don't use the term housewives because we feel that that is
Yeah.
a derogatory term. And homemakers who obviously spend their days caring for their children, caring for their household. And if you do ask them why they became homemakers, a lot of them would say not by choice.
Right.
Because they had children, because it made more sense for the mother to stay at home and care for the child rather than to get the children a babysitter or to get a domestic helper to assist them at home, or they didn't have the means to do so. And the difficult part about women who are homemakers and in the cycle of violence is that they have no outlet. They have been cut off their resources in terms of being financially independent. They have moved out of the working world for a long period of time. And we all know that if you are jobless for even a good period of several years, getting back into the workforce is really a very, very tough thing to do, whether for men or women.
Yeah.
And finding your footing back in the corporate world, or figuring out how do you work, earn money, and provide for your family is really a very difficult thing to do. And so many of these women are caught in this kind of situation where they have no choice. They have no options, or rather their choices are limited, but to depend on the perpetrator himself.
So the perpetrator uses that as a means
leverage
of control.
Yes.
How bad? I mean, like, what's the worst call you've ever had to deal with?
So if I can think of the worst call I have ever had my team deal with, was a woman called us from the hospital, and she said, "Can you please come and help me?" Because what happens in a hospital is that, so a lot of Malaysians don't know that we have these one-stop crisis centers in hospitals, and they're all located at the emergency department, where you could just walk up to the counter and you can say that, "I need help, I have been abused, or I have been raped, or I am a survivor, or someone has hit me." And they would straight away escort you to what we call the OSCC, the One-Stop Crisis Center.
Right.
And the One-Stop Crisis Center is typically a center where you could get medical help. You could lodge a police report right at the hospital. A social worker from the hospital, the medical social worker, would attend to you, etc. So going back to this particular case, a woman called us from the hospital with the advice of her medical social worker, asking us for help. because her husband was outside and she couldn't leave the room because he was in the emergency department.
Right.
And so we managed to somehow get her to lodge a police report, to get the police to escort her out of the hospital and to us. And when we saw her, she had a swollen jaw, and we were looking through her medication. Of course, she needed shelter, and WUWT provides refuge for women who are in need. And when we inquired further, we found that she had not just been beaten up. What happened was that she had endured abuse several weeks ago, and the reason why she was in the hospital was because her husband refused to let her go for follow-up because he had broken her jaw. And that's just one of the many gruesome tales that we've heard. We've seen in the papers very recently the professor who was strangled by her husband. We've seen so many articles in the newspaper lately about gruesome endings to domestic violence situations. And so this is exactly one of the many things that haunt me to actually share as well, that, you know, when women call our hotline and when women come to us, it is almost never the first time that they have been beaten up. It would have been a series of events that led to them being fed up, to saying that, to coming to a point where they would acknowledge that maybe this has to end, and therefore I need to seek help because I don't know how to do it myself, or I may not, I need support in order to do this.
It's sad to know that it takes so long for them to actually get the help, right? I just want to know about your crisis center. I mean, the where you take that lady who actually was in the hospital before, the husband was right outside. Your facility, where you take her after that, what happens? Do the cops escort her? Is the husband taken away? What happens at that point when you actually get that call?
So in order for the police to intervene, the survivor would have to make a police report. And she would have to be ready to take action. So if we go back to the legal interventions that are available for survivors out there, so Malaysia has this thing called the Domestic Violence Act.
Right.
And the Domestic Violence Act is a special act that enables survivors of violence to be able to get an interim protection order, which is sort like a protection order, restraining order kind of thing.
Right.
So, but in order to obtain that interim protection order, the survivor has to be prepared to make a police report, and not just any police report, a police report to take action.
Right.
So in this particular situation, she obviously decided that this is the best option for her and her children that were in tow with her, and therefore she decided to make the police report. And so the police were able to remove her from that setting, send her to us for safety, and to arrest the husband, because they are not able to conduct arrest unless a police report has been made.
And all that happened at the hospital?
Well,
does it happen immediately? I'm just trying to figure out the flow here.
It depends. It depends, because in order for them to ensure that they are able to charge a person, you need to go through several processes.
Right.
Occasionally, they are able to immediately arrest the person, or otherwise they will at least need a warrant to arrest the person.
Wow. Just listening to it is traumatic enough already, right? Now, I want to touch on...
But what I also wanted to add is that the DVA, Domestic Violence Act, is only applicable to those who are in marriages and family members.
So if it's
what we are severely lacking of is protection for couples, for couples who are not married. And the Domestic Violence Act does not apply to them, and therefore the regular criminal code, which is the Kanun Keseksaan, goes in play. But they are unfortunately not protected by law for them to get a restraining order or a protection order against their perpetrator.
So you need to be married to an abuser for you to actually get the protection that you need, in a way.
Yes.
Okay, something needs to be done there. Now, let's talk about signs that someone's being abused, because there's something about being Asian. We're very particular about, number one, our privacy. And also, because we're particular about our privacy, we're particular about other people's privacy as well. We never want to, I keep forgetting the word, jaga tepi kain, somewhere, all right?
Jaga tepi kain.
Yeah, like you never want to invade someone's privacy, and you don't know whether someone's actually going through something major, so you hold off. But when it's abuse, if you hold off, that's dangerous. Someone could lose their life. Right? So how do you know when someone's being abused? Let's say I'm a guy and I have a friend, a girl, who seems completely fine. And then next thing you know, she's starting to be a bit more reserved, and maybe it's in college or something. How do I really know that that's abuse?
There's a few telltale signs of individuals who are in a abusive, in the cycle of violence. Like what we spoke about earlier, abuse does not necessarily have to come in the form of physical abuse.
Yeah.
The difficult part about identifying whether it's abuse or not is especially when it's done in such a way where it is mental abuse, it is social abuse, emotional abuse. Those are the kind of non-tangible, untangible abuses that you really can't pinpoint.
Right.
It's easier to see someone with a bruise and say, I'm going to help you, as compared to someone who is withdrawn and completely, a change of character, for you to really wonder if this is something really internal, personal, or it could be one of the elements of abuse. But I think that, like what you said, Malaysians, and in general, Asians, are very, they're very protective over their privacy of, and it's also a matter of saving face. So we don't talk about these things enough.
Yeah.
But in a circle of friends, if you do have individuals that you think might be survivors of violence, there are always subtle ways of dropping them numbers, starting up topics of conversation about individuals that that have been abused, talking about current issues or trends along the lines of rights of women, etc., to just bring up the topic to see how much you could test the waters.
So you look at their reaction to that?
You look at their reaction, you provide them the information, perhaps not by handing numbers to them or telling them what they need to do, but by letting them know that there's more support out there than they might think there is, and that these support are readily available. A high level of confidentiality is exercised when it comes to helping survivors of violence.
Okay.
And that they really do not need to be in that situation or to feel trapped in that situation.
Now, there's another side to it, though. At least in my mind, when you start doing things in a group, and let's just say, yes, there is something going on within that relationship, I don't know how bad things are, and then you start talking about all these different situations that maybe, I heard someone might have been abused, and these are the things that they can do, just dropping subtle hints and everything. Aren't you leading them on in a way that maybe there could be something going on? I don't know whether you know what I mean. Like, that person might not know they're being abused.
Which is really the best thing, right? Because that's the thing about being in that cycle of violence. It takes a lot for a survivor to actually acknowledge it herself.
Right.
That I am a survivor of violence, that I am actually in an abusive situation. Many individuals give themselves and their spouses and their partners excuses and say that, oh, we're just going through a rough patch, oh no, but he loves me, but he's just having a difficult time, or but, oh, he's just protective over me. But that really isn't signs of a healthy relationship, and anyone who is not in a healthy relationship should know that they have the option to terminate that relationship. It is their right, it is their choice, and call it whatever you may, like planting an idea in their head, but these are exactly the kind of ideas that could potentially save their lives in the long run.
My worry is that, let's say there is something going on, and it's not as serious as I thought it was, and then you start telling her all this stuff, and then next thing you know, it's again the whole Asian culture thing. What if I broke up a relationship that was actually completely fine? But then she thought
if the relationship was completely fine, you couldn't have broken it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to know whether there's any way that you can
but
beat
it's
someone
true.
up.
It's true. So I wanted to share with you this particular advertisement, or rather video, that I'm sure you can YouTube and find for it. It is called Ring the Bell. And it was actually done by an NGO in India, where to address the bystander effect of our culture, where we would always say, yeah, but it's not really my household, I don't really know what's going on between them, should I really intervene, I don't even know them that well, but I can hear that this woman is obviously in an unhealthy relationship. And so what this video was, it was actually done in a comedy setting, but it had a lot of truth to it, where the community or the neighbors around the setting, every time they heard her screaming or an argument escalating, someone would just randomly ring the doorbell and disrupt it. But the key message to this was that what they were doing in return as a community was to show him that we are watching you.
Right.
And this is not just your own household problem. And that is exactly the kind of mindset that we want to change, that we aspire to change, that we aspire to work along with everyone like yourself and every other individuals who might have talk shows or what, to look at domestic violence as a problem of the community. It shouldn't be seen as a household problem. It is a disease and a community problem that affects us all. Because if someone within the community is experiencing this, it should be all of our responsibility to make sure that we can alleviate whatever pain or difficulties this person has.
Right.
Whether we know her well enough or not.
Now, in this ring my bell situation, the worry is also, we're watching you. Mm-hmm. Every time something like this happens, behind closed doors, could it potentially make things worse?
Well, I think from the experiences that we have, whenever perpetrators know that they're being watched, whenever there is a law out there, which and the truth is that not many perpetrators know that they can be persecuted by the law for incidences of domestic violence, because they believe that there's a household problem. But based on our experiences, it's better for them to know that they themselves could get into trouble, rather than to worry about someone else thinking, to worry about just my neighbor causing some trouble by ringing my doorbell.
Right.
I mean, metaphorically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a neighbor could call WAO right now.
Yeah.
And say, I know someone's going through something.
Yes.
And then
And
you will get in touch with them?
So no. So we will advise the neighbor to call the authorities, or to perhaps try a way to pass our number to the client or the survivor in question. And the reason why we do that is because we're very consent oriented, and we want to make sure, and we truly believe as well, that when a survivor is ready to leave an abusive situation, she will get in touch with us. And by forcing someone to get out of that abusive situation before she's ready to do that, it might actually cause more harm than good. So the good thing is about letting her know that she has support. If you know, for example, a neighbor, you know that she is going through incident of violence, show her that you have our support. Share resources with her, whether it is a number, whether it is a leaflet, and the mentality of knowing that someone is around me and protecting me and having my back is going to preempt her to make a decision on whether or not this is a situation that she wants to continue to be in.
What happens if you do all this, get her out of that situation, try to protect her,
and she goes back
to
Well, that is her choice, but this typically happens when individuals are not ready enough. And there will be situations where a lot of women that we have come across were in those situations where they decided they wanted to leave, and then once they had the cooling off period, they decided maybe they're going to give the perpetrator another chance because, well, people might change.
Okay.
Yeah, but we truly believe that it is the person's choice We respect their decision. What's important is that we need to let them know that as and when they are ready to make a clean break, that all these support systems that were built around them would not crumble just because they made that decision to go back to an abusive situation.
When a situation like that happens, and then they're thinking of going back to the partner who abused them, do you ever, maybe not just WAO, maybe other organizations, do you ever speak to the perpetrator about, look, do you know what you did was wrong?
Yeah.
You
No,
need
we
therapy,
don't.
dude. Something's wrong with you.
No, we don't. So the reason why we don't do that is because WAO adopts a client-centered approach.
Right.
So all of our resources and all of our assistance is directed towards the client herself. And the reason why we do that is because our main frame of how we work is to empower women. And so we're empowering her by giving her choices of options for her to make the decisions herself, while we stand at the sidelines to provide her the support that she needs in the course of making that decision. And should she ever be in a situation where she decides that I'm not ready to make this and returns to an abusive situation, then we will continue to support her by whatever ways that we can, which is to still avail programs that we might have, include her in whatever activities that she might be interested to attend. And we have had success stories over the years of women who have gone back to abusive situations multiple times, but have eventually said that, hey, no matter what, WAO is still going to be on the side and they're not going to judge me. And that is the most powerful thing for them, that they know that help would be there without them getting judged because of their judgment call. So we have had situations like this where eventually they will find the courage, they will find the strength, and know that they will always be supported to walk out of those kind of situations.
When you look at a success story, right, do you think of, okay, you're strong enough to just leave that abusive relationship? Or when you look at a success story, is it even after going through all that, they went back to that spouse or the partner? Like, what's the success rate when you think of the abusers changing for better? Does that ever happen? Like, they stop abusing because, wow, I just realized I'm an asshole, all right? I won't do that anymore.
We wouldn't put a blanket on all perpetrators, but we would say that globally, the cycle of violence, which is the hitting, which is the argument stage to the hitting stage, to the crisis, to the woman living the crisis, and to the honeymoon period where she gives in again because he has obviously repented, and then it goes back in a whole cycle. That's why it's called the cycle of violence.
Right.
We would say that it typically never really ends.
Right.
It may morph into different forms of abuse throughout the years, but the cycle never truly ends until you get out of the cycle.
So abusers never change, generally,
In general.
from what the case that you've dealt with, like, at least, right?
Yes.
So the whole point of this show, the whole point of why we do this, is we want to be better men. And part of that is not turning a blind eye to the problems that's going on around us. So what do we do while living in this culture of not invading other people's privacy and whatnot? What can we as men do?
Okay.
What, rock right up to the house and say, stop this, or no?
So I believe that it starts within your own circle, within the people that, the community, or rather the people that you have interactions with. Putting yourselves out there to openly state that you as an individual do not take abuse lightly and do not think that it is right, nor a man's right. That is really something that, you know, we often fail to do enough. Abuse and our stance on these kind of situations are things, table topics that we don't talk enough of. So that is one area. A second area that you could do as an individual, and anyone else could do as an individual, is to disseminate information. Get yourself educated on what are the helplines out there, know what the resources are, and disseminate the information, because information is power.
Right.
It's not about figuring out who is right, who is wrong. It's not about figuring out whether the abuse had really happened or not. that really isn't ours to judge, and that shouldn't even matter at all. But what matters is knowing that as an individual that you have provided sufficient information to a potential survivor, so that in the event that that potential survivor wishes to make a police report or to seek help, that she or he knows exactly where to go to and
Right.
how to do it.
Don't rush in and pull her out of the situation, because it's like,
Well, if it's blatant abuse and you can see that it is something that is currently ongoing, then it is really a decision depending on how close you are with her. It is really a situation that you might want to see if it's something you would want to engage.
okay,
But typically, giving the moral support, providing the information that is much needed so that she knows where she can seek help, where she can seek support, is the most crucial aspects of getting someone out of that circle of violence.
it's similar to like you can drag a horse to water, but you can't force a horse to drink. That kind of situation in a way,
Yes.
right? But now,
You need to tell the horse where the water is.
yeah,
Yes.
right. Look for the water. That's where you, if you're thirsty, that's where you drink. But walk us through the process though, because let's just say, like, I want to say I know a couple that's going through this. So imagine this: you think there's abuse happening in this relationship. You know both people very, very well. All right. You don't know who's abusing who. Right? Because they're constantly arguing and they're constantly at each other's throats, and people talk, but you don't know what's really happening. Is he abusing her? Is she abusing him? There's a lot of misinformation going on over there. What do you do then? Like if it's pretty clear that the woman is being abused, yeah, give her all the information. But in cases like this, what do you do?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do as Asians in general is to stop trying to find out who is right and who is wrong.
What do you
Because
mean?
it doesn't matter. It
Right.
doesn't matter who is the person in fault or not, especially when it comes to situations like this where you don't know who the abusers are.
Yeah.
But what you could do as an individual is to put that lens aside to determine who is right or wrong before you get involved, but to just put it as, I am going to provide information to this individual on how he or she can get help, and
Okay.
what are the signs of being abused, and what exactly is an unhealthy relationship that we all know about. I mean, if there's elements of control in the relationship, if there's possessiveness, physical violence or emotional blackmail
Right.
that goes on,
Gaslighting.
then it is absolutely not healthy relationship to begin with. But the issue also is that sometimes when you are in it, it's hard for you to make that decision of whether or not, or rather to have that judgment call on yourself to
Right.
say that, look, I am in an abusive situation. Many people who are in abusive situations do not realize that they are in such a situation. So it is individuals like you and I who have to just give them that information and let them decide for themselves, but unrelentingly giving out that information and not say that, look, I've already advised you once. If you don't want to do anything about it, I can't help
Yeah,
you.
because sometimes you just go like,
Because
I don't know what's going on.
I get it, the frustration that, because it's so easy for us to see on the outside and say that, you are obviously in a situation of violence, why aren't you getting out of it? But at the end of the day, it's about respecting the person's individuality, and knowing that no abuse is right, not for whatever reasons. And that is the kind of messaging you need to get across to someone who does not know that they are in an abusive relationship, or is in denial that their relationship is really a pit for them.
Right. Okay. So how do people get help? From WAO specifically, how do people get in touch with you?
Okay, so they could go to our website,
Right. Which is WAO.
wao.org.my.
Right.
They could go to our website. We have a page which is frequently asked questions, or how do I get help page. And we have recently upgraded our website last year, and there are extensive questions and answers that anyone and everyone could get from there. We have it both in English as well as Bahasa. And we're looking forward to translate that particular page, especially into other ethnic languages
Right.
as well. They could call our hotline, whether it is to get information or to report an abuse or to seek help themselves or to know what their legal rights are. And if calling and talking over the phone is too daunting or not your kind of, it's not your cup of tea, you could also reach us through Tina, which is our WhatsApp/messaging service.
Right.
And Tina stands for Think I Need Aid. And the reason why we came up with Tina is because it's a number. Well, Tina is such a common name, and so it's a number that you could safely store it under your phone.
Just Tina.
And you could say that you're just texting Tina without anyone knowing that this is actually the Tina app that that WAO is running.
Right.
And through these three platforms, you could reach out to WAO. But of course, if you do not wish to reach out to WAO, or if you are in a situation of crisis, you can always go to, if you are hurt or physically abused or even mentally abused, you can always go to any public hospital, to the emergency department, where we have the one-stop crisis center. It is a Kementerian Kesihatan setup where women and children who have been abused or who are enduring abuse can go there and seek assistance all under one roof. So you can get medical aid, you can make a police report, you can be referred to social welfare for assistance, all under one department.
What if the perpetrator is there? Like earlier you mentioned that there was one case he dealt with and the perpetrator was actually there. So does the victim tell the nurse, the doctor? Do you whisper a safe word to say, I'm in trouble here? How do you do that?
You can do that. The staff that are handling all the OSCCs across the countries are very sensitized to that. So should you tell them, or should you indicate that you need to be brought to a safe space ASAP, they would definitely escort you and make sure, because the OSCC room is typically inside the triage area.
Right.
It is not an open area. So of course, if you're waiting to be seen by someone, you would wait outside in the emergency waiting area. But if you walk in and you know and you explain to them that you have endured some form of abuse and you need to go to the OSCC, they will straight away escort you to that safe room.
If someone in an abusive situation is calling, and let's say this is a lull moment, not something that's happening at the particular moment, in order for them to not aggravate the situation, let's say they call WAO. And obviously the perpetrator is probably right there. They can't say, look, this dude is beating me up. They can't say that. How does the conversation go where they can use safe words? And do you mask the conversation? Like maybe they could be ordering burgers or a pizza or something. How do you do that?
So that's actually a technique that we do undertake when we don't have that many of callers who would call us in those situations to try and get assistance.
Right.
But when we do have individuals who call us and may have questions that may sound peculiar,
Right.
we acknowledge that they might be in a situation of distress.
Yeah.
We try to follow up with them and see if we can call back their phone number. And if we are truly under the impression that they might be in a situation of distress, then WAO might make the call to report, to make a formal police report and call the police to check up on them.
Because I always worry that someone might say something wrong. They might call and it just everything just blows up.
Definitely, which is why at WAO we are very, very careful. All of our hotline frontliners, and actually our hotline frontliners are trained volunteers who are doing this for absolutely free. So they are the first line of triage who have been extensively trained. They're called crisis support officers, and we're very, very proud of them. So they triage and figure out, based on a standard operating procedure that we have trained them on what is the level of severity of this person's call, and then they will push it out to our social workers, where our social workers will then try to arrange for a time and safe time
Right.
that they can make that call or text the survivor to ask how we can help them further if that has not already been communicated on the phone through the first level of triaging.
Right. I noticed the number that you guys have for WAO is only in the Klang Valley, the 03. What about if you're from other states and East Malaysia?
You can still call 03. Of course, we're not a toll-free number, so it will incur charges. But we are on Tina, which is on WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is typically free. All you need to do is have data, or you could even message us. But the beauty of Tina is that Tina can also be used as a consent platform. So if we have someone who just texts us on Tina and say, call me, because
Right.
you can't say anything else, or save me,
Yep.
we would do the necessary and try to intervene the best we can.
Right. But it's not just for action, right? It's not just in
No,
the Klang
it
Valley.
is for information, it is
Right.
for action, it is
But if you're in
for-
Perlis, let's say in Perlis or whatever it is,
You could still call us.
But you have people in other states that are ready to help
Yes,
out.
so WAO is not just a case management. I mean, we don't just do individual case management for women who are seeking assistance. We have a large capacity building department which works with communities to build resilience and awareness of gender-based violence within these communities.
Right.
We also have a huge advocacy network with other sister organizations throughout the whole of Malaysia, and also good networking with the D11, which is the Department of PDRM, which deals specifically with women and sexual crimes.
And they're sheltered in all these states. They can be.
Well, unfortunately, there's not many shelters that cater to the needs of domestic violence and girls and women who have experienced gender-based violence.
Right.
WAO is one of the very few, and few meaning counted by one hand,
Right.
shelters that is specifically for survivors of violence to do with gender-based violence.
And it's only in the Klang Valley, that one.
It's only in the Klang Valley at present time.
So at the moment, you can call WAO
Yes.
even if you're out of the Klang Valley. But
We have had clients who have called us from upstate, from down north, and they have, and we have walked them through their exit plan from the situation, and they have traveled all the way to WAO's
Right.
refuge to seek refuge.
and
Yeah.
they don't have to pay anything. Everything's
No,
covered for.
our services are entirely free.
Right. For-
Everything.
For how long? As
Well,
long
we
as it takes.
believe in mitigating the crisis that the woman is facing, and that's why we call it individual case management, because you can have 20 domestic violence cases that sound exactly the same off the script, but we subscribe to the ideology that every case is unique, everyone has a different and unique situation, everyone has extra baggage that another person might not have. So that's why we do individual case management. So we don't have a timeline of how long you can stay or how short you should be staying. We practice an open shelter concept, meaning that we don't keep you under lock and key. There are safety procedures that are in place to ensure that survivors who are in our shelter, which is a confidential location, remain confidential and remain protected. We have security measures in place, but we don't cut them off from the world.
Right.
So a woman who is seeking refuge from WAO can typically still wait for her crisis to over. We could help her, and she could seek jobs. There are alternative placements for their children should their crisis end and they're ready to leave the shelter but may not have the resources to do so. So I wouldn't put a timeline on it, but I would say that the eligibility criteria for our shelter would be that you would have to be in a situation of crisis where you do not have any other resources to help you with, and that's where WAO would come in and provide that assistance
As long as they need it, right?
as long as they need it for the period of crisis.
Jantans and Jantanites, You and me, we need to do something about this. If we see something wrong, we need to step up, be informed, be supportive, and be proactive. Now, if you have a story to share, we would love to hear from you. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in our next discussion.